So this discussion about so-called transforming problems, as we've been discussing, in fact, it's really part of the previous module. This is all part of how to develop bodhicitta. So again, putting it in some kind of context, putting it in framework is so important, as I've been discussing so intensively, that this approach is something quite radical. As Pabonka Rinpoche says, if you're not a suitable vessel, these techniques are not for you. In other words, what is a suitable vessel? Well, just like if you go to university physics, but you haven't even done high school physics, you're not a suitable vessel. You won't know how to understand it. You won't know how to apply it. That's exactly the point here. So I think, as I always say, we're not used to thinking in spiritual terms that compassion's more difficult. But in fact, it is. The level of compassion that Buddha's talking about that we can cultivate is outrageous, is radical. And we will not comprehend it even intellectually if we haven't done the earlier stages of the practice. If we haven't understood karma for a start, that we're all, the first level of practice is you think about karma, that you are the product of your own past actions. All your happiness is a fruit of your past virtue. All your suffering is a fruit of your past non-virtue. This is the most fundamental point in all of Buddha's teachings, all of Buddha's philosophy, all of Buddha's psychology, all of Buddha's worldview is based upon this view. So if you don't know that for yourself from going into junior school, then you haven't got a clue what Buddha means when he says you should love your enemy. There's no logic to it. The Christians have logic, but it's not the same here. The Christian logic is because God loves everybody. God made everybody. That's the logic if you're a Christian, not the Buddhist one. Completely different logic. And you have to understand it first intellectually. Then you can learn to apply it emotionally and experientially. So karma is the first one. And then that means you recognize that you for a start, you are the source, you are the fruit of your own past. You are the cause of your presence. Your present experiences were created by you. So as I often say, we understand this when it comes to, let's say, you're a musician or a mathematician. You know perfectly well you are the cause of your being a mathematician. You created the mathematician. Think of it this way. It's exactly the same here. But emotionally, we don't think that. We think everybody else caused me to be happy. We think everybody else causes me to suffer. And so we just stay as victims. I'm an innocent victim. People should make me happy and people shouldn't make me unhappy. That's the view of ego. That's not the Buddha's view. We create ourselves. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, karma is like self-creation. So knowing this for yourself gradually causes you to take responsibility, to grow up, to be accountable. Then you can transfer that to others and go, oh my God, look at sentient beings. Look at the harm they're doing. They don't realize that they are causing this themselves. They are coming into this life from the habit of killing, the habit of stealing, the habit of lying. They continue to kill and steal and lie, and then they're going to reap the results in the future. That's the basis of compassion. That is the single one point, which is the basis of compassion. The only compassion we have now is that poor little innocent victims. We only have compassion for the innocent doggy, innocent pussycat, and innocent child. We have to have innocent victims before we can have compassion for them. In other words, we feel that people have to deserve our compassion. So our views are completely not like the Buddha's. They're totally different. And that's why if you leap into this type of teaching, like we're describing here in these texts, in this particularly the 8 verses, which I want to continue to discuss, it's shocking what's being said. Langri Tangpa is giving this outrageous advice, shocking advice. It makes no sense to us if we don't understand karma first, if we don't understand that all sentient beings create their own selves. And crucially here, in the compassion wing, what's driving us is our incredible wish to benefit sentient beings, incredible love and compassion. And even this is outrageous for us. We can't imagine the level of love and compassion that bodhisattvas have. It doesn't make any sense to us. We can only imagine the love and compassion that we're capable of. It doesn't make sense to us. So this is why we have to understand the teachings logically, the progression in your internal progress. And even if you are vaguely on the bodhisattva path, to the degree that you've lessened the neurotic delusion, you've lessened in your delusions, you've lessened your negative karma, you've grown your goodness and grown your compassion. So by the time you get to read these 8 verses, which we're discussing, which will continue today, Langri Tangpa, he has to be a highly evolved being to talk the way he does. Such as intellect is coming from his direct. So we talked about this last week. So let's continue on our 8 verses. I'm opening up my version of the course notes here. Okay, here we go. So we've been to, let's just go through again. We'll summarize. We'll start. I'm looking in the phone version here, the phone version of the course notes, and it's this particular, what's this? All right, so whatever. Verse 1 was determined. Remember this verse 1, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings. And remember the logic of that, which was quite surprising to us. And the discussion we had last week, Mark mentioned. We very many times, this doesn't make any sense. In ordinary English language, it doesn't make sense to us to think that you're determined to get the greatest benefit from sentient beings. It sounds like you're going to abuse them and use them up. This is not the meaning. This is a very specific meaning that's also expressed in this idea that when we rely upon suffering sentient beings, this is how the lamas talk. We rely upon suffering sentient beings, or we need suffering sentient beings. We need them. They're the grist for our mill. In other words, a bodhisattva needs to be around suffering, because think about it logically. If you don't ever meet a person who is suffering, how can you possibly ever cultivate compassion? So from that perspective, you need to meet suffering people. You need it. And as Song Rinpoche, Geshe Sopa says, bodhisattvas need most of all their enemies. And this is what's expressed in these verses. They're the most radical object of our compassion. And we'll explain as we go along. So it's a whole different approach. We need to understand the logic of this. Then the second line is even more insane, who are more precious, and it says to me, more precious to me than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Well, there used to be one of those eons ago, but let's just say here, humbly, simply, €1,000,000 or something. It sounds like crazy. What do you mean all sentient beings who are more precious than $1,000,000? We can't even get our head around that, like we discussed. It has no meaning to us. It's a bizarre idea. But if you understand, a mother would say that. A mother would say that. My baby is more precious to me than €1,000,000. That makes sense to us. That's then the point, because we're trying to cultivate that view for every single sentient being. This is the whole point in this bodhisattva path, you know. Why? Because every one of them is experiencing the fruits of their past actions. Every one is experiencing the happiness as a result of their past virtue, not as a result of all the delicious things out there, which they all think are the cause of our happiness. And every one of these sentient beings is experiencing the fruit of their own past negative actions by having suffering. And every one of these sentient beings is doing virtuous actions because they've done them before. And every one of these sentient beings is doing negative actions because they brought that habit with them. So we are the programmers of ourselves. We create our own reality. We create our own suffering. We create our own happiness. We bring with us our tendencies. So when we know that and we look at suffering sentient beings, we look at the harm they're doing. It's like a mother looking at her child who is harming others. I'm that junkie kid. Everybody else can't stand that junkie kid. But the mother has such compassion, and this is the point, because she sees that that junkie kid is harming himself. That's the logic here. And that's why we want to say they're more precious for me than €1,000,000, because I want to only have love and compassion for them. And that is what is smashing all the delusions in our mind that cause us to be separate from all these beings. So these lines are outrageous, you know, they're kind of crazy. They're not normal behavior at all. And the conclusion is, I will hold them most dear at all times. The words are so cute, most dear. Your baby, yes. All sentient beings, give me a break. So this is, we can aspire, but we've got to understand the logic. I'm serious when I say that. It's not just some gooey feeling we're trying to get. That's too unstable. That's just verse 1. And they get worse as you go, as I've been saying. So the best we can do, if we can't begin to even think that all beings are more precious to me than €1,000,000, just think, may I think this one day. Sow the seeds in the mind, aspire. It's like you're in grade 1 mathematics and you can just add 1 + 1 is 2, but you're listening to Einstein teaching physics. You can aspire, okay? One step at a time, because there's a method there. There's a map there, and you're excited to be on that map. That's the way to think. One day I'll be able to be this way. And just saying these words is so profound. It puts an imprint in your mind, and it puts atomic bombs under the delusions. Just saying the words, you know, it's incredible. That was verse 1. We did it last week. Verse 2, we did this last week as well. Where are they? It's a long commentary. I don't know whose commentary this is. It must be Lama Zopa. Oh, this is, oh, I've lost them. Here we go, verse 2. So now, basically, as it says, this is in session 2, I think, or something, verse 2. This one essentially is trying to cultivate humility. I mean, but it's, again, it sounds absolutely shocking to us. When in the company of others, I will always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart, hold others dear and supreme. So again, like I said, this is not how we talk in our culture. Even, you know, in a positive way, we can't talk like this. It just seems too weird for us. So we've got to understand the meaning. And this is where it's difficult for us, because right now we think we've got low self-esteem. We think we are already the lowest of all. We really believe that. But the irony is, as I discussed last week, and I think it's so important to see this, the only reason we think we're the lowest of all is because when we look out there and we see other people who might be better than us, we sort of take it personally, like a personal insult. And it's almost like, how dare they be better than me? Oh, look at me, I'm the lowest of all. This is not the instruction, but that's how already we think. So to be able to hear this in a different way is quite difficult for us. And like I said last week, and it's not comfortable, the only reason we've got low self-esteem, which is the particular delusion that over-exaggerates our bad qualities, is because we have the delusion called pride, which over-exaggerates our good qualities. So in other words, if you were, I always think of this example, just think of two people who are both really good at the same thing. And we're in a party, we're in a group of people, and one of them is excellent, like a really good tennis player. I've been watching Wimbledon lately, so I can talk about it. You know, these tennis players. And they're both incredibly good at tennis. But one is arrogant and one has got self-confidence. I mean, they don't have a term in Tibetan, in Buddhist psychology, they don't have a term called self-confidence, but it's what we understand. But don't confuse it with arrogance. You see, all the delusions have a very specific function of exaggerating something. Exaggerating. So pride and arrogance, which we don't like to admit to, but really is definitely inside us, over exaggerates our qualities. And so it's not comfortable. All the delusions make us not comfortable. They're very uncomfortable. So the person who's arrogant is not comfortable. And when there was in a group of people and they're kind of double checking there's no one who is better than they are. And if they meet a person who is better than them, they'll freak out. I mean, there's one particular tennis player, I don't want to be personal about him, but I mean, I like the guy, but you can see he's arrogant. He's incredibly good at tennis. He's incredibly arrogant. But the moment he starts to get beaten, he has tantrums, he throws his racket, he almost like bursts into tears, you know? That proves he's got arrogance. But suddenly, because he meets a tennis player who can beat him, he's like a child, he's like a baby. I'm hopeless, I'm no good, I can't play tennis. This is such a good example. We know people like this, and we've all got this. So the reason we have low self-esteem, the only reason that guy on the tennis court, when he's throwing his racket and almost bursting into tears, thinks he's hopeless, because this person in front of him dares to be better than him. And so he takes it as a personal insult. And then he becomes all full of self-pity, you know. This is what arrogance causes us to be. It's very fascinating. But now the other tennis player is not arrogant, but is humble. So that's the interesting point. So humility, we confuse it with low self-esteem, and we confuse self-confidence with arrogance. But self-confidence is a quality of a person who has got humility. A person who's very good at something, but is humble, is also very content with who they are. They're content with themselves. That's self-confidence. So I always remember when you watch His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I remember years ago, I always tell about this, back in 1982, we invited His Holiness, Lama Yeshe invited His Holiness to Europe, a bunch of different places, including other organizations as well. And so Lama so kindly, this is an extra part of the story. appointed 10 of us as security guards for His Holiness, 5 men and 5 women. I mean, it was very radical of Lama, so amazing. And somehow for me, for some reason, I got the job of being one of the security guards for His Holiness. So it was incredible to travel around for about 6 weeks with His Holiness. On the plane, we guarded his hotel door, we guarded him at the teachings. It was like hilarious, you know. But to watch His Holiness, on the one hand, it was clear that he was unbelievably humble. Everybody who was with him, he always says it himself, whoever I am with, they're my best friend. And I remember when we did an article years later on His Holiness, when he visited Australia in 96, and we did a big issue of Mandala magazine interviewing 100 people. I interviewed 100 different people, all of whom had been around His Holiness, the press, the media, the police. Everybody said, and this is the same as what I observed first in 1982 when we traveled with him. On the one hand, he was incredibly adored by everybody. He loved everybody. But at the same time, you could see he was really powerful. He was confident. He wasn't like a little mousy person. He was powerful and confident and charismatic, but he was humble. So really, if you think that, when we think humble, we think a quiet little person. We think low self-esteem. It's totally mistaken. And again, I remember in 96 in Australia, and I quoted, you know, interviewed all these people about him, just got 50 words from each person. Everybody was so deeply moved by him, but he was powerful, charismatic. He was incredible, but he was humble. So I think it's very encouraging to think this. To be humble doesn't mean to be kind of like a doormat. Humble is content. It's a virtue, and virtues don't feel uncomfortable. So this one about seeing ourselves as the lowest of all is a gross, awful, horrible delusion. It's self-hate, and it's coming from arrogance, because we would rather be better than others, frankly, but we don't like to say that. That's what's underneath this low self-esteem. But self-confidence comes with humility. You can see that. I mean, you can see these 2 tennis players I'm thinking of, you know, both incredible at tennis, but everybody adores the one who is humble and unassuming and always gives credit to the other people. But this other guy upsets everybody because he's so arrogant, you know, but even though he's good, it's so clear that low self-esteem is this fragile kind of sense of thinking you're important and being offended when you're not, you know. I mean, it's so clear. It's very fascinating. So what this means, like I said, the way to apply this particular teaching, if you can't think everybody is superior to you, everybody, you adore them all, you know, you can't be like that. You can't be like His Holiness yet. Then go one person at a time. So a way to apply this in daily life, think of anybody you know, your friend, a person you don't like. It's very specific. Think of something that person can do that's better than how you do it. That's the way to think. So you genuinely admire that person. You think that person is better than me, and I'm delighted for them. So you're putting yourself, but you're praising the person. You're looking up to the person. That's what it means. We don't like the sound of lower and higher. It sounds gross to us, but get the meaning. It's very powerful practice. It's a very powerful practice, you know. And I mean, all this means we've got to look carefully at what's going on in our mind, you know, because actually what we're doing every second, we're walking down the street, we're at home, we're among people. We don't realize it. We're always judging everybody. We're always judging, always trying to find fault, which means it's always in reference to ourselves. Always like that. It's very subtle, you know, very tricky. Got to really watch that. So this is a very conscious practice, a very conscious practice. Even a politician you hate, you think is a monster. I really mean it. Think of one thing about that person, even just the way they look. Maybe their ears are cuter. Maybe they've got prettier nose. I mean, something as simple as that. You consciously find something about that person. It's a very powerful practice. That's better than you. It's very good. You know yourself, if you have a mentor, that's how you think. You're practicing music. You've got a marvelous teacher. Of course, you look up to that teacher. Of course, you think that teacher is better than you at music. See, what we tend to do is we think it's something intrinsic, like somehow in their bones, they're a better type of person than me. No, we're talking about specific qualities. Some person is definitely better at mathematics than you. There's no question about that. But we think we take it personally. Oh, they're a better person than me. That's not what's being said. And it's so wonderful. The Lamas have this very sweet way. If you're feeling a bit arrogant, simply tell yourself something you can't do. If you're feeling a little bit low self-esteem, tell yourself something you can do. It's a very good practice, I tell you. It's very, you catch yourself. It's a very good practice. So the third verse, I think we did this one as well. And no, we didn't do this one, maybe. We go into this one now, and it kind of takes a slightly different tack, this third one. I have to find it. Okay, here we go. So this one, it seems to be a slightly different tack. It's interesting. Vigilant, so being very vigilant, there's a very specific mental factor in Buddhist psychology called vigilance or alertness. It's watching like a hawk every second. His Holiness says, when it's in meditation especially, he says it's like a policeman that's watching that all the bits are doing their job. This vigilance is a crucial state of mind. Being very vigilant, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, already this indicates an advanced practitioner, and I'll explain. Endangering me and others, I will confront and avert it without delay. So what this implies, think about this, what this implies is a person who already is super, super familiar with the workings of their own mind, moment by moment by moment. And that's advanced. I'm sorry, people, 99% of us are not conscious of every moment of what is happening in our mind. That's our goal. That's being our own therapist. That's where we're going with all these practices. But this is implying a quite advanced person. And the other thing is this, it's so interesting, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, in other words, the moment some attachment arises or anger arises or jealousy arises, you catch it, but it's endangering you, but also others, because you're going to harm them. I'll confront and avert it without delay. This implies that the default mode is virtuous thoughts, and then suddenly a little naughty delusion pops up. Well, I'm sorry, for most of us, it's the other way around. The default mode for us is these uncontrolled delusions, you know? So this implies already a quite advanced person who's super conscious and is already a good practitioner. So we do our best, okay? But this is the actual, this in this verse, this is the actual spot on, bullseye, exact, precise job of being a Buddhist. Please hear my words. Every practice you do, every practice, all the prostrations, all the motivations, all the abiding by the laws of karma, all the living in vows, all the purification, all the mantras are all to help you do this precise job. This is what being a Buddhist is. Catching a delusion, hearing what it's saying, argue with it with a virtue, and then counteract it. That's how you get enlightened. This is the job of getting enlightened. One tiny moment at a time. That's it. Because why? Because remember, the Buddha, in Buddha, the etymology of the word Bud implies, when you're a Buddha finally, the eradication of all these delusions. And Da implies the development to perfection of all the virtues, which you use to argue with those delusions. So the job finally is to rid the mind of all the delusions and grow to perfection all the virtues. That's what you will end up with when you're a Buddha. So this is the actual hands-on job every single second of the day. This verse is expressing it. And this way, even if you get some semblance of control over your mind in daily life, you will never have a mental breakdown. You will never lose the plot. You will never get really depressed. You will never have anxiety attacks. This is because why? Because you're catching the thoughts at ever more quick level, ever more subtle level, and you're confronting and averting it, which means you're arguing with it and you're replacing it with a positive thought, a virtuous thought. This is the job. This is the job. This is the job. It's an incredibly sophisticated job, but this is it. And why? This is why we have ups and downs like yo-yos, why we all go crazy, because we don't have any control over our thoughts. You know, the negative thought arises, you know, yesterday at 4 p.m., you got a bit of an angry thought. And then before you know it, today at noon, you're having a mental breakdown because it's been constantly raging in your mind and you've never paid attention until now it's screaming at you because you don't avert it. That's the brilliance of this method. And we keep getting better and better and better at this job. And it takes time, I promise. Now the next three are super intense. Each one is more heavy than the next. And this is the way I like to put these. This is where the real essence of these thought transformation techniques are. This real essence of transforming problems is expressed now in these next three verses. Okay, so verse 4. This is a heavy one, and they get worse as we go. So my sense is, this is, you know, kind of like if you look at the world out there in general, not so close to you. And we see this because we live in the world through our iPads and television and newspapers and so we read about people, don't we? We read about. So you listen to these words. Whenever, and think about this is written back in the 10th century, so there can't be too many of these crazy people back then in the 10th century. But look at our world now. And look at what they say. Whenever I see beings, people who are wicked in nature, I mean, such a cute word, wicked. It sounds like a Broadway play, and it is, in fact, a Broadway play. That sounds cute. Wicked almost sounds like a joke. Wicked doesn't sound like very evil, does it? But listen to this. Whenever I see people who are wicked in nature and overwhelmed by violent, negative actions and suffering, these people are suffering. So who are they? What word would we put there? Well, I think the word we'd use in the common modern world is the word psychopath. Okay, it's a great word. As soon as we always put them in Greek as well, don't we? Whenever I see psychopaths, whenever I read about a psychopath, whenever I read about a mentally ill maniac, whenever I read about a terrorist or a bomber, and they didn't have guns and bombs back in those days, not in Tibet. Whenever I hear about murderers and rapists and terrorists and warmongers, this is what we're talking about, people. Not like your ex-husband who kind of was mean to you. People are really deluded, really harmful, really deluded, harmful people, and who are therefore totally suffering. And this we don't like to think about. Because you see, you know, when you say a person's suffering, we want to have compassion for them, but you don't want to have compassion for a psychopath. No way in the world. But this is the point here. Whenever I see or hear about psychopaths, murderers, warmongers, just remember it, pedophiles, terrorists, this is exactly what Langri Tangpa is talking about. How will you think about this person? Okay, this is the piece of advice. I will hold, and they say rare. I'm sorry, the world is not so rare anymore. Maybe in 10th century Tibet. I will hold such rare ones dear, as if I had found a precious treasure. So if you don't understand the logic of this, it's an insane thing to tell you, isn't it? It's an insane piece of advice. It's mad. In the modern world, there is not a fraction of logic in this. I mean, people would think you're mentally ill to think that you'd found a precious treasure when you read about a psychopath. So what the hell is Langri Tangpa trying to get us to do? It's the same logic as all of it. When we understand karma, when we understand that every sentient being has had countless past lives, when we understand that every moment of a person doing a negative action is the result of them having done it before, having been driven by that tendency, such that you wake up in this life and you continue to do it beyond your control. The joke to think we've all got free will is such a weird cliche. It's a mistaken concept. As far as Buddha is concerned, it's a bizarre idea. We are driven by the power of our past karma. And all that means is if you've practiced something often enough, it's second nature, isn't it? So you look at a person who's good at playing the piano, you know it's not cosmic. You know they just didn't suddenly play piano. They're driven by the habit of having practiced piano. So if you see a psychopath, a murderer, a bomber, a terrorist, you name it, they are driven by their tendency of having done those actions before. Now, without understanding karma, this has no meaning. We just prefer to think that they're monsters and they all should go to hell. That's it. We don't know why they're like they are. We know their mother didn't teach them. We don't know why they are like this. But if you have the view of karma, that explains why they are like this. And that is the basis of your having compassion for them, simply because all those negative actions they're doing now will sow seeds in their mind and will ripen as much worse suffering in the future for them than they are even causing now for others. If we don't understand karma, then this has no logic whatsoever. And if we understand karma, then we can see we're attempting to develop this level of compassion, because this person is harming, forget the harm they're doing to others, but look at what they're doing to themselves. Like I said before, a mother can have compassion for her alcoholic junkie kid because she sees he's harming himself. Everybody else doesn't want to know that. They just want to put the kid away in jail, you know. What a monster. But this is the level of compassion we're trying to cultivate. And without understanding karma, there is no way to have this. It's very simple. As if I'd found a precious treasure. In other words, again, see, this is what these verses are trying to get the person to. The instinct of ego is very strong in all of us. We've all got a tendency for compassion and love, but if you analyze it, it comes only naturally for the nice people, doesn't it? Look at your own self. If you meet the rat who's eating, who's kind of, or you meet a vicious animal who is eating your little pussycat, the instinct of compassion is for the little pussycat, and the instinct of anger and terror and rage against the brutal other animal, isn't it? So this is the kind of compassion we're trying to cultivate. In fact, the bodhisattvas will have more compassion for the pedophile, will have more compassion for the brutal animal who's driven by its own violent tendencies from past karma than for the victim. Why? Because the pedophile and the maniac animal, driven by their past negativity, are causing countless lifetimes of unbearable future suffering for themselves. But the innocent the victim is just finishing their karma. This is a hard one for us to think about. So there's a whole bunch of things we've got to think about logically first. This is not just some emotional thing we're trying to get. It's based on logic. It's based on a particular view. And these are the Buddhist teachings. And it's up to us what we do with it, you know. It doesn't come naturally. So why they're a precious treasure is because it's forcing you to go against your aversion. And it's forcing you to cultivate this profound compassion for this suffering sentient being, which is putting atomic bombs under your ego. As a teacher said, apparently a teacher was famous for having a really ugly, mean, angry, rude cook. And someone asked the teacher, why have you got this guy, you know? And he said, how else would I purify my anger if I didn't have him? This is the real practice of the bodhisattvas, and this is the essence of transforming problems. Because the bodhisattva, this person, the aspiring bodhisattva, is desperate to smash their delusions, because their delusions are what are preventing us from becoming a Buddha. And you don't get delusions if you only meet nice people. It's easy to have compassion for the little victim. It's easy to have love for a person who's kind to you. So this precious treasure, this pedophile you read about, is forcing you up against your own instinct to have aversion, and to force yourself to go against that, to put atomic bomb under the aversion, and to have compassion for this person. That's the logic. That's the logic. Of course, it's intense. And this is, again, the point. If you don't understand karma yet, if you're still in a relationship where you are the victim and you're being abused, this practice is not for you. This is advanced physics, I promise you. Reading about emptiness, you've got to squeeze your brain. These words are not difficult English words, but they're kind of more outrageous than emptiness, I tell you. Okay, now I'd like you to ask me some questions. It's been 40 minutes since I've talked, lots of things I've said. So please, 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 let's have discussion before we go further. More questions, some questions, please. It's really important, and try and stick them to this specific approach, this specific topic. Okay, please ask me some questions. I want discussion. Yes, yes, my dear Ariella.
Good evening, Venerable. I think I'm asking this question again. So this poor pedophile, this poor wild lion, how can they ever get a better chance in their next life with—
I understand, darling. I understand. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Because their mind, like yours, goes back and back and back and back. And their mind, like yours, has lots of karmic imprints from other good qualities, from being good in past lives. They've been human. They've done good things. And those karmic seeds have not gone astray. They're sitting there waiting, latent, waiting to ripen as happiness and good qualities. So this is where, you know, this is why there is always an opportunity, and there's never too late. They can't do much now. I mean, even I remember myself in my life, anger was a very strong habit. And I think even if I'd met the Tibetan Buddhist teachings, even 6 months before I did, literally my mind would not have been ready to hear that anger was a problem. I thought anger was good, and I really sincerely mean it. It was like a philosophy. So my mind had to be ready to hear that. So if you say to some pedophile, you know, it's not appropriate to want to have sex with little girls, for example, if a person is fully involved in that philosophy, and if you read people who think that, you know, then it would be impossible for that person to hear it. A person even who is a really nice person, but let's say their profession is to go fishing. I remember one time on the television watching a program years ago about the Inuits up in somewhere where we used to call Eskimo, where these people's culture is to bash the baby seals to death for the blubber, for whatever they do. And he was almost in tears when he said, these animal rights people come along and they insult my culture. In other words, because the habit due to past killing was so strong in his mind, he got born in an environment where people bashed baby seals to death. He could see the baby seal squealing. He could see the blood spurting, but he couldn't see suffering because the habit was so strong. Even just fishing. I always tell the story of this little boy. His mother, years ago in Kopan, the mother said, a little boy, since he's tiny little boy, he fell in love with fishing. He was a nice boy. You see, we don't consider fishermen to be torturers, but not being rude, but animals. Fish suffer a terrible death. They die tortured. They die without water. They suffocate. They have a terrible death. It's like torture. But that's not because it's not violent. We don't see it. So this fisherman, his mother never liked going fishing with him, but she tried to honor him. She said she went fishing one time, and this is the point. Because he was attached to fishing, it was his habit, it gave him pleasure. He couldn't see the suffering that the fish were experiencing. But his mother, who didn't want to fish, she could see the suffering. This is the tragedy of the delusions. We're propelled by these habits, and then we're forced to do the habits from our past habit. Look at our pathetic habits of wanting to eat too much cake. I mean, don't be so, you know, luckily you don't want to jump on little boys all day. Luckily, you don't want to torture all day. One of my friends in prison on death row in Kentucky, my Buddhist friend Mitchell said, Rabina, this other guy, he thinks of torture all the time. This is the power of past habit. So then in this life, he can't do much. In his life, the fisherman can't do much. But they've got karmic imprints from before. And that's why there's never too late to try and help a sentient being stop suffering. Try and stop the cat from harming the mouse. Try and stop the dog from harming the cat. Try and stop your little child from harming another. At least you can help them. But the karmic imprints are there, so we have to try and help them nourish those karmic seeds. That's the point, you know. So it's long term, Ariella, but there's always an opportunity. Do you understand, Ariella? Ariella, do you understand?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, Les Lorraine. Hello, my dear. Talk to me, Lorraine.
Yes, thank you, Venerable. I used to study psychology, and there's a pattern when you see people who have been abused and that they become abusers. And I'm wondering if that is a karmic there's just something that's kind of lends to this cycle.
I understand, but I don't think it's always followed, does it? I don't think that's true. You see, I think that seems to be the logic we use in the modern materialist view, because we don't look at karmic imprints. So we always assume that if you torture, it's because you've been tortured. If you abuse, you've been abused. But I don't think that always follows. I know lots of people who've been abused who do not abuse, and I know lots of people who have been abused but don't abuse. I think this is not always true, Lorraine. I think it's the best we can come up with in modern
I
psychology.
agree. I've been abused and I don't abuse.
That's right, darling. You see, one is to have a tendency to do something, and the other is to have it done to you. There can be both in one person, but it could either be one or the other in one person. So it's a really interesting point, isn't it?
Yes, and to the point of the therapy, that to follow it up, to keep that from happening, just to keep the cycle from in the people that does occur in.
Sorry, what do you mean by that, Lorraine? Say exactly what you're saying. I don't understand. What are you saying?
I'm sorry, I have to apologize. I'm a little bit sick right now, but so basically there's therapy for both the victims of abuse and for abusers.
Right,
and
exactly.
Just trying to figure what responsibility do we have when we encounter these kinds of people, because we're not therapists, but we need to do something to.
Well, if you have the Buddhist view, Lorraine, it's really true. If you have the Buddhist view, like, for example, this man I know on death row in Kentucky, he comes to the classes. I know the guy. My friend Mitchell, who's a Buddhist, told me about him. But this guy, he's got these tendencies. I mean, he doesn't talk to me about it, so I don't talk to him about it. If he came to me, that would be different. I would try to give him advice. But for the Buddhist perspective, the only way to understand why you are driven since you're tiny to harm, to kill fish, to torture, to lie, to steal, is not because it's done to you, which is how we think in our culture. It might also have been done to you, but because you came into this life with that tendency. That's the fundamental one as a Buddhist. So if you have that as a view, you know that a person has a tendency to want to steal from you. You don't be naive and let them steal your purse. You protect yourself from them, knowing it's their very strong habit, but you be wise as well as compassionate, Do you understand? Of course, the victim one is very difficult, because with karma, that's a heavy one for us to think that we've done it before. We don't like to think that. So, of course, that's where if you're helping a person, I have people come to me who aren't Buddhists. I don't talk about karma to them, not at all. Of course, I wouldn't. That would be inappropriate. So you got to have the wisdom to know how to help people,
Yes. And
yes,
I do. Thank you.
Yes, Terry. How can I help, sweetheart? Talk to me.
Yeah. Hello. Okay. When we practice meditating, we go quite a lot towards the internal. We stay in the mind. We stay within our own internal limits. And I think about if let's say, like during the studies, there's a lot of things that you contemplate in the mind, and there's a lot of things that comes up in front, like as theoretical and some tasks where you need to write. And I'm thinking, like, the process all in all, at what point does the let's say responding to the assignment becomes kind of like, the egomaniac is guiding the mind, how to say, to express maybe a little bit more in the assessment than should be given. And I don't know.
I don't quite understand, Terry. I don't understand, darling. Try and ask me another way. What's the question? Just try and ask it as a question. I don't understand.
Like, I'm having a hard time in stopping myself for let's say responding to the assessment questions sometimes, and I realize it's my ego wanting to prove all kind of things about what am I aware of, or how wise am I currently, or something like this. And I don't know, somehow it feels like it's a little bit destructive habit, I'd say.
I think it is. I mean, you mean the habit in your mind of criticizing yourself, you mean, or what? Which one? What's the habit?
Like the action of wanting to almost delete all my internals outside, just to prove to the outside about something.
Okay, that's very much called, this is one that I think this is attachment to being seen as an intelligent person, or attachment to being approved of. That's very deep in all of us, Terry.
For sure, yeah.
Very deep inside. So we have to watch that one. You understand?
So how to work with that one? How to let it?
You can't do anything about it, like it said in that verse. Watch, being alert you see the delusion arise and you grab it and you avert it. That's the skill we have to cultivate. There's a very advanced skill, Terry. Most of us, our thoughts are uncontrolled and we don't catch them until they're screaming. So this is what our job is every day. That's what we have to learn to do. And the sooner we can grab it and argue with it, the better we will be. But that's what our progress will indicate. More and more skill at seeing our thoughts. This is the one, darling. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else, please? Other questions, please, on these particular 3 verses so far? Or it's 4 verses we've done. Yes, that's Terry again. Another question from Terry or not? No, okay. So who else? Please ask any questions. I need questions. Come on, people. And if not, we'll continue to the 5th verse. Yes, hello there, Christina.
Hello.
Hey, darling. Hello.
Yes, I was wondering when we've been abused from someone, and it's about me, and now I'm ready to send him compassion and love. Is it also time just to purify all my bad karma because I was against him at first?
So ask it, I hear your words, but say it in a different way. Say it in a different way. What's the actual question? I heard it, but I want to hear it better, understand it better.
Isn't it also time to purify all the bad
I hear what you're saying. Yes, yes.
I had made by be upset about him and
I hear.
Not
This is
understanding.
pretty advanced. Yeah, very good. I understand, Christine. So this is where if we first of all, you see, we first hear this concept, don't we, at the very beginning of the teachings, when we learn the Buddha's view that we come into this life, 1, with our own tendencies, and then 2, with our experiences. So there you are, particular human being. And I want to say this as well here, you know, in your life, where are you, Christine? You've disappeared off my window. I want to see you. Where have you gone?
I'm here.
I can't see you. I know you. I'm sure you're there, but I can't see you now. I want to see you. What happened to your window? Oh, there you are. I see you. Okay, listen, darling. I want to say this as well. So first of all, when we learn about karma and you begin to understand, if you think about all the things that happen in your life where people have harmed you, but also I think it's really good at the same time to think of all the things that have happened where people have been kind to you. I think it's really important for us to remember both together, because often the way karma is taught at the very beginning, it's all about the suffering. So it's all about the negativity, and we can get very carried away with only thinking about the negativity. But if we can also think at the same time, Christine, in your life, you check up, you've had lots, I bet you've had many people who've done good things to you. Would that be correct?
Yeah, even that man, yeah,
there you go. There you go, darling. So if we can remember, if we can remember the good and the bad together, it makes it easier to own responsibility for the bad. If we only remember the bad, it's very hard, because then we abuse ourselves and think I'm evil. That's a tendency. So then, yes, of course, the logic of karma is that every experience you have, good or bad, is the fruit of your past. So if you remember the good things, that's the fruit of your virtue. Then you can own responsibility. If the bad thing that happened, then you also caused that one. In other words, the logic of this karma applies to good and bad. The logic of botany applies to weeds and flowers. So when you can own the bigger picture, it's really powerful for the mind. So the very first level of practice, darling, before we really cultivate compassion, is when you do the purification and you see this suffering that you're having at the hands of this person, and you think, of course I regret whatever I did in the past. Look at this. It's sort of, look at this. I must have caused this in the past. I regret this because, look, I don't want this suffering. So the regret is related to the suffering you're having, and you know you don't like the suffering. So it's sort of, that part is like compassion for yourself. That's compassion for you. You regret having done the past actions, whatever dumb things that you did, because look at it now ripening as my suffering, and I do not want this suffering. That is a really important first step. Now, when you can go to the second step, which is refuge and they call this reliance, and this is a similar point as before, then you see this person, you must have harmed them in the past. So now you have compassion for them. But why do you have compassion for them? Because their harming you can only produce their future suffering. That's the basis of having compassion. But it depends on if you're able to do that. Some people, the abuse is so bad, you can't get past this first step. So we have to know where we are at. We have to know what we're capable of. You understand my point?
Yeah, for sure. No, after years now, it's possible for me.
Yes,
It's
there
more
you go.
feel
That's
that he's still hurting others, but
yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Have compassion for him and for them. But this is the thing, when we realize we create ourselves, we produce ourselves. So a person who's harming others is creating terrible suffering for themselves. Whereas we just rather blame them and get angry. That's not the point. This is when the real shift in our mind, you know, this is the point. This is the point.
Thank
Christine.
you.
Yes, Lorraine.
Yes, thank you, Venerable. When I was in Fort Worth, there was a, I think, I'm not sure if they were Buddhist or not, but there was this group, and this woman, they would use mantras and things, and I thought they were very spiritual and started following them. And at some point, this woman just starts preaching that the reason women are abused is because they are not compassionate enough to their abusers. And she started promoting this right-wing kind of agenda, and I was furious.
I understand, yeah.
And
I don't know, I can't say anything about that. I don't know, darling, I can't say. We have to use our common sense, but we have to use our common sense when we hear these types of people and be reasonable and check up on their qualities, don't we?
Yes.
So what's your question, darling? Is there a question from that?
Yes, I did genuinely feel a connection with that, with not with what she was saying, but with the music and the things. And I was just so confused by that because it was such a divide.
I understand, yeah. So then I think nothing to discuss, Lorraine. I have no comment, darling. We have to just check on teachers and who they are, if they're valid or not. That's the main thing that I'm learning from that.
All right. So when you feel a pull to that, it's a kind of
just you check up on the person's credentials. Are they a valid teacher? Are they a good person? We have to know that. You do that with yoga, you do that with math, you do that with anything. You have to, that's why the first step is to check on the credentials of the Buddhist center, of the teacher, to see if they're valid. You know, that's the whole thing. That's the job.
So it's logic versus emotion there. Okay.
Absolutely, darling. Absolutely, Lorraine.
Thank you.
Okay, people, so let's go to the next verse. We can go to verse 5, which gets more heavy. And I think this gets closer to home. That first one is about, you just read the news and you read about the pedophiles and the terrorists, you know, that's out there in the world. Now I think it's getting a bit close to home. It's very interesting. We'll do this next one. Verse 5. Verse 5 says, it's more heavy, even more heavy. When out of envy, you know, or jealousy, others mistreat me with abuse or insults or the like, and we mightn't use the word abuse. We know we've been hurt by others. We all know we've been insulted by others. We all know that people do mean things to us. Everybody has that experience. And then going right back to the logic of karma, one track of karma we're born with is the tendencies in our own mind. This other track of karma is in relation to how we're seen and treated by others. This is called experiences similar to the cause. So when you look in your life and you see your mother was kind to you, your ex-husband was kind to you, people are generous, people are loving, people treat you nicely. Every moment of that happiness, every moment of that is the fruit of your past actions like that to them. Karma is pretty personal. So when you get, like I said before to Christine, when you can own all the good experiences, and often we just take the good experiences for granted, but when you can own responsibility for all the good things that people have done to you, the kindness, the love, the generosity, the forgiveness, the taking care of you, the giving you things, then we can start to realize when the bad things happen, someone's jealous of you at work. This could be at work, for example. Someone's jealous of you. So they abuse you, they insult you, they criticize you behind your back. We all have that experience. Our grandmother could do to us, the person at work, everybody has this. This is called experiences similar to the cause, which is your past negative actions like this to those people. Karma is pretty personal. So what's the attitude we're trying to cultivate towards them? I will accept the defeat and offer the victory to them. This is pretty intense, isn't it? I mean, this is the hardest thing to do, because the instant we are hurt, offended, insulted, criticized, the instant, the millisecond we hear the criticism, we get the insult, instantaneously we are hurt. Instantaneously, we are offended, upset. How dare they? Especially if we didn't do it. Especially if we didn't do it. This I think is the main way people suffer on the planet, besides sickness and things. Being harmed by others, being insulted, offended, blamed when you didn't do anything. But when you know the view of karma, you take responsibility. And that's why it's so good to think about the good things. Please listen to this. It's very powerful. Whenever good things happen, people are kind to us in the street, a person lets you go past the light, you know, a person lets you go first, a person serves you, someone smiles at you, a person at work admires you. Look at this, look at this, look at this. Look at how hungry we are to hear those words. We accept those gifts. We are so touched and honored by those gifts. It's wonderful to be praised. It's wonderful for people to be kind to us. But listen to this. We never, ever, ever, ever ask the question, I wonder what I did to cause that. We don't care what caused it. We just want more, kind of greedily. That's attachment. But the moment a bad thing happens, we panic. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. So in other words, the deep instinct of the hubris of attachment, this emotional hunger that only wants the nice things, that only wants the praise, that only wants people to be kind to us. And we never, ever think, wow, this is the fruit of my past virtue. We never think that. We just think, give me more, please. But the minute we get an insult, one word of criticism, one piece of upset, we have a panic attack. How dare this happen to me? I don't deserve it. This, I think, is really underpinning these views we all recognize as the attachment, this hubris, this emotional hunger, this assumption that I only must ever get the good things. And listen to this, that somehow I deserve the good things. But the moment the bad thing happens, panic attack. I don't deserve the bad things. This is what we need to analyze, because if we do the analysis with karma and the understanding of the mind, there is no logic to it. It's deluded. It's completely deluded, but it's totally normal world. So this demands a lot of thinking, a lot of clarity, a lot of inner analysis, you know. So the practice here is enormous. You give the victory, not out of like passive aggression. Oh, yes, you're right, and I'm wrong. No, genuinely, you allow them the victory. I mean, this is intense practice. This is powerful practice. I always use the example of years ago in Sydney, a friend who was a Buddhist, John, and another friend was there, George. They were there, had a party, and George told the story about how this guy who ran the party, I always tell the story, he had a brand new BMW and he discovered that it was scratched by the next door neighbor. And then he fixed it and it got scratched again. He had no idea what he thought the next door neighbor thought he had done. But obviously the guy next door thought he was horrible. So he scratched his brand new BMW. So the guy said, what would you do? So people joked, oh, well, scratch his car. But George said, I'll tell you what Lama Zopa Rinpoche would do. He would find out what this old guy likes, and then he would buy a beautiful gift and he would offer it to this old guy and he would ask him to forgive him. Remember, John has done nothing wrong. But because we understand karma, that if anybody thinks you've done something wrong, even when you haven't, it's because you have done it in a past life. That's called the karma, is called the experience similar to the cause. So if you've lied to someone in the past, this life you'll meet them again, and even if you're speaking the truth, they won't believe you. Now, if you've told the truth to a person in the past, and even now, if you're lying, they will believe you. This is past karma. So we've got to understand this particular kind of karma called experiences similar to the cause, which is basically how you're seen and treated by others. And because we have this deep emotional hunger to only have the nice things and we can't stand the bad things, I tell you, this is the basis of most people's suffering, of being abused by others, being offended, your family rejecting you, this kind of experience, you know. So this is a powerful practice. So anyway, this guy, John, he thought this was a great piece of advice. So he did that. He found out this old guy liked golf. So he bought him these expensive, beautiful golf balls, and he wrapped them beautifully. And he went to the guy's next door, knocked on the back door, and he offered him the golf balls. And he said, please forgive me for whatever I've done wrong. He apologized. He's done nothing wrong. Not in this life. So he went back home and he felt very good about this. He was very relaxed. He felt he'd finished it, you know. So this old guy came in next door. He knocked on the door and he had the gift unwrapped and he was smiling and he said, this is the kindest thing anybody has done. He said, everything is forgiven. I mean, this amazing kind of example, a wonderful example. He took the blame. This is the most profound practice. Even your sister says something so small to you. You're so upset. You can't believe it. You defend yourself immediately. Even if you did something wrong, you still defend yourself. We know this one. So all these practices are putting atomic bombs under attachment, under aversion, under the instinctive ego. That's why they're so powerful. This is an amazing practice. So this is closer to home, I'd say. Now you listen to the third one. This is unbearable. Verse 6. This is, I think, is like close to home, your own beloved children, your beloved ex-husband, a person really close to home. You listen. When someone whom I have benefited and in whom I have great hope, like your beloved child or your beloved husband, gives me terrible harm, they cheat on you, they reject you, you know, I will regard that person as my holy guru. I mean, this is too much, you know, this is unbearable. This is the greatest suffering of so many people. The number of people who come to me like mothers and fathers in tears, brokenhearted because their children have rejected them. You know, this is such a common story. It is unbearable, you know, unbearable. These practices are too much, you know, they're so profound. The words are so simple. But to take these seriously, these simple words are based upon understanding karma, based upon understanding the delusions, based upon understanding the causes of suffering and the Four Noble Truths. And if you haven't done that work in the earlier stages of practice, this will be meaningless to you. This will be like garbage words, you know. That's why I say these words are simple. The words about emptiness are complicated, but I think emptiness is easier to handle than these techniques, these instructions. And remember, these 8 verses, these techniques were kept secret because they're totally opposite to the world. And if you don't have context, if you haven't done the wisdom wing, if you haven't understood karma, if you haven't looked into your mind, if you haven't understood the delusions and how the mind works and what's possible, these words are absurd. They're like poison. They will not do you any good. So at least if we can just read them, have the wish to aspire to be able to do this, and then slowly try to practice. Because these are, you know, this is the interesting point. These, when we think about practice, when we think about, say, practices to develop compassion, this don't sound like developing compassion at all. They sound like developing self-hate. They're so peculiar, you know. But the logic of them, the people trying to practice this, the aspiring bodhisattvas, have already such enormous love and compassion for sentient beings. And they're desperate to be qualified. They're desperate to be qualified to benefit sentient beings. And what's preventing you from benefiting sentient beings is your delusions. So you want to smash the delusions as much as possible, because they are what preventing you from being able to have the wisdom and the levels of compassion possible to benefit sentient beings. You're driven by this compassion. It's like a mother who hasn't got the ability to heal her child, and she knows she's the only one who will be able to do it. So she's desperate to work and study day and night to learn the method so she can heal her beloved child. It's like that. It's what, you know, it's almost like bodhisattvas are kind of fanatic. It sounds so peculiar to say that. They're not normal people. They're kind of extreme levels of incredible love and compassion, incredible perseverance, incredible enthusiasm. And it's hard to imagine this because most of us are driven. See, attachment, we have no idea how profound it is. You know, we just think it's, oh, I like chocolate cake. I mean, this is like a joke. Attachment is so pervasive. Why do we get tired? Because we're attached to comfort. Why do we get fed up with things? Because we're attached. Why do we get bored? Because we get attached. Everything is because of attachment. We're driven by attachment. This body is a walking machine of attachment that is hungry like a vampire to be comfortable, to get what I want every second. We are able to be compassionate. We can reach beyond ourselves, but look how hard it is. And then to think that a person, bodhisattvas, would never give up. They never get exhausted. They never tire of this. This is where you hear the stories of people like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, just example. He literally doesn't sleep. For him, as Venerable Roger, his attendant, says, sleep is a disgusting waste of time. This sounds like mental illness, doesn't it? Why? It's because he's driven by these levels of compassion, driven by this intense wish to only benefit others. Driven by it. It's hard to imagine this. It's hard to hear this. Like I said, for me, emptiness seems more comfortable, you know. This is like outrageous. These teachings are outrageous, you know. But when we understand the logic of them, we can persevere one step at a time. We can persevere. You know? So are there any questions, please, about these specific verses, this approach? If not, it's really okay. Yes, Terry, yes, your question, darling.
Okay, I have.
Yes, sweetheart. What's your question? I can't hear you, darling. You have to unmute, I think. Yes, Terry, I can't hear you, sweetheart.
Terry, there might be a problem with your microphone.
Okay, never mind. Maybe ask later, darling, if you can find it. Okay, so anybody else have any questions? I mean, yeah, any questions? What do you think, people? Anything at all? Or about something else now, maybe something else. Any other questions on your mind? Please do ask me. We've got 10 minutes, we've got 15 minutes. Anything else on your mind at all from past other things? Please, very welcome. Because these verses are so intense, I think. No questions of any kind of question whatsoever.
Yes, Venerable.
Good.
Cyril.
Yes, hello, Cyril.
I don't know, but when I listen to this, I'm so depressed. I see like I thought that I was a good practitioner, and I hear these things, and I'm
Cyril,
just.
That's
I
right.
I feel like I'm so far away from
Yes,
it, and
right.
the first person that comes to mind is my ex-wife, who I divorced, and who just has made me suffer so much.
Yes.
And applying these techniques to her
That's right.
seems almost
Impossible.
literally impossible for me.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. I understand.
So
Cyril.
how do I do?
Go one step at a time. Okay, let me ask you a question. So you're on this path. You would agree you're on this path. This is your map, is it? The
Yes.
Mahayana Buddhist path is your map, is it?
Yes, it is.
So you can see examples. First of all, do you know any examples of people who look like they do this? Have you got any teachers you admire?
Yes, of course, absolutely.
Okay.
My root guru, the Dalai
Okay.
Lama, many
Okay.
people.
Okay, so is that not already encouraging?
Absolutely.
That you know if he can do it, you can do it. So then it's humble. So make sure that you're being humble and not hopeless and low self-esteem when you say, I'm so far from it. It's humble to say that, but then you should have the enthusiasm to know, wow, look at His Holiness. If he can do it, I can do it too. That keeps you optimistic. If you just fall into low self-esteem and you become hopeless, that's a very dangerous thing to fall into. So just make sure it's not that. But it's good to recognize, because we can get a bit hubristic and arrogant. Oh, I'm such a special practitioner. Wow, wow, wow. And then we hear these. This is why for me too, reading these practices is mind-blowing. I enjoy to read about emptiness. It gives me pleasure. This does not give me pleasure, Cyril. It scares the life out of me. Do you understand? But it's good because you can see how far we have to go. So that's good. But keep moving, honey. If you now listen to me, this is the point. If you don't have a map, then my God, you are right to be hopeless. You are right to be despairing. But you do have a map. That's what keeps us going. That's what's incredibly important.
So my next question is if you feel that you're just incapable of being in the presence, for example, of your enemy, because you're just not there yet.
That's right.
Do you force yourself to be?
No, that's where you have to know what you're capable of, Cyril. It is not appropriate. No, you keep away, but you understand yourself. You don't give yourself, you don't defend your, they're evil, I must keep away from them. You know that you are not capable of dealing with that yet. You have to know what you're capable of. This is unbelievably important. So if this technique is not possible for you right now, you have part of your mind think, one day, may I be able to, but right now, not possible. But if you just say, no, never possible, I can't do it, then you're stuck. So be humble, know you can move towards it, but right now I can't cope with that person. I just don't know what to do. That's why it's so important. And that's where people with their partners, with their ex-partners, with their parents, whom we have very strong karma with. And the most violent experiences are often the closest ones, So if we can't stand being around our crazy mum, we have to keep away. Even if people criticize us, we have to have that courage. But to know that one day we will be able to, but we have to know what we're capable of. It's really important, Cyril. Do you understand?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, so important. Yes, Lorraine.
Yes, thank you, Venerable. So I had a situation not very long ago. I have been very sick, and there were some problems with my kidneys, and for a moment it looked like I might be in a position to need a transplant. That turned out, thankfully, to not be the case, but I was shocked when my sister, who is by any comparison, regardless, a much better person than me, just says out of the blue, well, just let me know if you need a kidney because, obviously I'm the closest match. And I'm thinking, well, that's not, I thought the obvious thing would be just to let me die. I mean, I'm the loser of the family, basically. I'm the one that just kind of messed everything up. And I'm back living at home with my parents after a spectacularly failed marriage, for spectacularly failed everything.
So what's the question?
The question is, when it comes to accepting a gift such as this, that it's phenomenal.
Yes, it is.
Would I be less or more selfish to deprive myself of my family?
Sorry, what? You what?
I feel like, okay, so my family apparently loves me more than I thought.
That's right. So cut to the chase. I think I saw your email, by the way. I haven't answered you yet, but this is perfect, darling, for everybody. So tell me what you think. What do you think the learning from this is for you, Lorraine?
That's what I'm trying to decipher. I'm trying to decipher whether or not is my value to my family more precious, or is there I'm really having.
I think you're making it complicated. I think if someone offers you their kidney, if someone offers you $5, you have the humility to be grateful for their kindness and know that that's the fruit of some virtue of your own in the past, and perhaps use that as a little bit of juice on your self-respect rather than on your self-loathing. That's the learning, darling.
All right, that makes sense.
Thank you. It's wonderful, Lorraine. Very kind. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Thanks, Storytime. What else are people? Any questions? Anybody else? We've got a few minutes. There's Nina. Hello, darling. Are you back in Zurich, Nina? Where are you? Are you in Timbuktu somewhere? God knows.
I'm in Timbuktu at the moment.
What? You what?
We're to the US and we're in St. Louis.
Oh, okay.
So almost
Okay, right.
Almost Timbuktu. It's
Okay,
close.
Good, darling. Happy to see your face, Nina. So any other questions?
Thank you. I'm happy.
I don't want to say any more verses now. I want to do the next verses next week and we'll go, because these things, we really need to think about these, chew on these, think about these. Well, I'm glad you don't need a new kidney. That's very good, Lorraine. That's great. Your sister can keep her kidney. Okay, then, Stina, talk to me.
Yes, good evening, Venerable. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. I don't have the best connection today.
Okay.
I'm thinking about the verse, and I'm not thinking I would be able to do it anyway, but accepting defeat, offering the victory to others.
Yes, yes.
People who, I'm talking actually about a specific situation at work. The person who is, let's say, insulting.
Yes.
It's not only, I'm not the sole target of this. I mean,
No.
it's affecting many people.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's sort of a matter of acting on behalf of others as well. Maybe I'm not, do you understand what I mean?
I do know exactly what you mean, and I think it's a very interesting discussion, Stina. Let's discuss it, okay? I think there's two things here. First of all, I think the first thing is to really forget about the others. This is something we often say, you know, when somebody gets, you know, their child gets abused and they start a foundation to try for other abused children. Always we think about it, we think, well, we're going to do it for the sake of others. That's fine. But I think the real practice is don't worry about others. That's their job to defend themselves. You can support them. It's a bit like being a mother. You think your job is to make everyone happy. That can be okay. That can be compassion, but often that's coming from attachment as well. The real one is to see if it's appropriate for you. Is this a good teaching for me at this moment? Now, it doesn't always mean that that's the right thing to do. In another situation, it might be the right thing to do to be very firm with this person and to tell them off. And even, but you know what, Stina, it's got to be for compassion for that person, not just compassion for the other people, compassion for the person, almost to speak privately if you think it's beneficial. Well, you know, you're doing this to very many people and you're only harming yourself by doing this. And if it is genuinely coming from compassion, not out of anger, that could be beneficial. That might be a better practice, but you've got to decide. One time it's just best to take the insult. Another time it's best to defend other people. Another time it's best for the sake of the person. There are all these different tools at different times, and you need to know which is the right one at different times. Do you understand?
I've tried different tools in different times, but maybe more strategical and not with compassion as the purpose.
And I think that's the point.
Yeah.
I think if you were a mother, you would have real compassion for your child, who would then say, you say to them, no, you go to your room. I've already told you, you'll be angry with them, but it's got to come from compassion. And that's a tough one. Not just coming from anger and wanting to tell them off. That doesn't help. You can show firmness, but you've got to have some compassion for this person because they're the one causing themselves suffering. And in the end, nobody likes this person because of it. They're the one who end up suffering most, you know, and they're not, you understand? So it's got to be, it's an important component in there, compassion for them. Then you can be firm with them and very direct. And they might not appreciate, or they might, but you can try. You understand?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Okay. What else, people? I think it's enough. Oh, yes, Ariella, talk to me. Good, sweetheart.
And then what do we do with the frustration when we try to guide our child? Just what you said right now, go to your room, because we might be firm out of compassion, but the frustration comes because especially with children, you repeat it and you repeat it and you repeat it.
That's right.
And
frustration
many
is
times,
anger. Ariella, frustration is anger. So this is the point. We've got to see your own anger, and your anger is because your attachment's not getting what it wants. So there's compassion
for
there,
sure.
But if it's frustration, it's anger, and that's your own personal practice every single day.
And I thought I was getting better.
Not an easy one. And of course you are getting better, but we keep seeing new levels of it, don't we? This is an ongoing job, Ariella. Don't wait for any kind of magical time. Wow, I've now got it. You know, just keep going every day, being wise, being skillful. It's a difficult job living a life with other human beings, you know. isn't it?
Yes,
I
especially
can't
with
imagine being a
children.
parent. Honey, I can't imagine being a parent. I just can't imagine it. It's such an intense job.
Thank you,
sweetheart, what
Venerable.
else?
Thank
I think
you.
we've had enough. It's only 22 minutes past. I'm always shortchanging you, but I also talk fast. I always say that to defend myself. So why don't we just, who's there? Bruce. Hello, Bruce. Hello, Bruce. Can't hear you, sweetheart. Your name is unmuted, but I can't hear you. Wow, can't hear you, Bruce. How can we help Bruce, Lars?
I don't know whether his microphone
There he is.
is
Oh,
not
no, that's-
switched on to the computer.
I know, must be something, Bruce. I can't hear you, sweetheart.
He has to write it down and then ask you Venerable next week.
Do that. Yes, or
Maybe.
do it now if you like. Try and find a
Yeah.
way to write it down, Bruce, or something. Can't hear you.
Bruce, are you able to chat to type in the chat? Can you hear us?
No. Never mind. Keep it for next week, Bruce.
Here he is. He typed
Okay,
the
talk to
question.
me. Yes, good.
Do I incur dark karma for negative thoughts?
Sweetheart, listen, we've got body, we have speech, and we have mind. So the one that we first control, we can see is pretty hard, but is possible, is to control the body. So that's why Buddha says, well, at least, Bruce, don't kill, don't steal, don't jump on too many girls and boys, don't eat, he says things like that. And why he exhorts us to not do these actions is because they will cause us future suffering. That's your body. Then he exhorts us to at least don't lie, don't say things that are harmful, don't abuse others behind their back. Because why? Because this programs us with those tendencies, and we do not want the suffering. That's the very first level of practice. So now, of course, we can learn to harness our body and speech. We can learn to live in vows. We can learn discipline, but look at our mind. This is another story, isn't it? So the thing is this. When we observe, the more we observe our mind, we're going to see that thoughts are going to come no matter what. We don't sit there thinking, oh, I think I'll have angry thoughts. They seem to be coming, flooding into our little mental house, aren't they? So the thing is this, Bruce, there's a big difference between having thoughts and then buying into the thoughts. And when we understand this difference, we can be very relaxed. Otherwise, if we think every thought is necessarily, going to create negative karma, we'll go crazy, because the negative thoughts are so habitual, are so strong. But at least if you're aware of them and you begin, and you don't want to follow them, and you try not to believe their story. And otherwise we go crazy. We try to suffocate them. We feel bad. We feel guilty. This is not helpful. Thoughts are very powerful, very deeply ingrained. So the thing is, for example, I always use the example, let's say Nina's my friend and you're my boyfriend. And I'm mad as hell at you, Bruce, and I'm angry with you. And I go to Nina and I go on, Bruce is evil, Bruce is this, and Bruce is that, and I'm angry. And Nina agrees with me and says, yes, isn't he terrible, Rabina? Bruce, that's called being angry. That's called having angry thoughts, and I increase my anger. But what if I'm angry, but I'm trying to work on my mind? And I go to Nina, I'm in tears, and she helps me work with my anger. I'm still angry, but I don't want the anger. I don't want to buy into the anger, but I want to try and fix it. That's not, quote unquote, being angry. So you've got to be brave enough to see all the crazy thoughts, because they're from past karma. They're from past habits. They pop up out of nowhere. Sometimes our thoughts are shocking to us because of past tendencies. So we need to allow those thoughts to be there, label what they are, but let them come and let them go, and attempt not to grasp onto them, attempt not to have a conversation with them. This is difficult, but it's powerful. That's the answer, Bruce. So do your best, because thoughts are the deepest, the hardest to control. And then on top of the negative thoughts, if we can't stop them, say positive things. Don't worry about it. Say mantras, put mantras on top. Say Om Mani Padme Hum. That's putting atomic bombs under the negative thoughts. Even though you hear them in the back of your mind, say mantras, say positive things. Tell yourself, this is not who I really am. It's just old habits, Bruce. It's okay. This is not really me. It isn't really you. The good thoughts are you. So all these are very skillful strategies we need to use with these all crazy, uncontrolled thoughts we have, you know, because we're surprised by our thoughts sometimes. They come up out of nowhere and it shocks us. And then we either try to suffocate them or we get guilty. And neither of these is at all helpful. That's a really good point, Bruce. I hope that's helpful.
Bruce wrote thank you in the chat, and
Good.
he said yes, it's helpful.
Good, good. I'm so happy. So, darling people, that's it. Another week gone by like a dream. We keep moving, never give up, keep having amazing optimism in our potential. We have this map, we're on this map, like we said before, no matter how, we know we've got a long way to go, but it's okay, we've got a map. Even if you've got a map that's 100,000 kilometers, if you've got a map, you just go one step at a time. It's a very powerful approach. One step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. Your journey might be 1 kilometer, but if you don't have a map, you're going to be in big trouble. So if you've got a map, you can relax. It's really, really, really important to remember that. And then look at the examples, His Holiness, Lama Zopa, whoever we've got. They show us it's possible. Then we can have confidence and never give up, never give up, never give up, okay? Jangchob, Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Kye Panam, Kye Gyu Chig, Kye Panyampa, Mepa Yang, Gonne, Gondu, Haba Shog, Gewa Di, Nyudu Dag, Lama Sange, Drubgyone, Drowa, Chikyang, Malupa, Deyi Sala, Gurpa Shog. May we never develop, even for a moment, wrong views towards the deeds of our most precious gurus. With faith and respect gained from seeing their goodness, may their full inspiration flow into our hearts. Okay. Thank you, darling. So kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Robina. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. And
all right. Yes,
thank
exactly.
you, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you, Venerable.